Hello, everybody, to all who are out there. Thank you for joining me. If you are joining me on a Friday night, St. Patty's Day night, I know everyone's probably not the first choice to be here, but thank you for joining me anyways. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. This is the first live stream I've done in a long time, so I apologize if things are not in great working order. So please bear with me as I try to get used to everything here. Let's see here. So yeah, first off, I want to say thank you again to those who are here on a St. Patrick's Day night. So I am not wearing green, but I am wearing my Bushmills Irish Whiskey, Sexton Single Malt Irish Whiskey shirt, which does, here, turn around here, does go over the true Irish way is celebrate St. Patrick's Day. So you can read that there. This was a gift that I got from Bushmills through like their Instagram page last year. Yeah, so give me one, just kind of get this all organized. I am going to drink some Irish whiskey, so let me go ahead and grab a bottle of that real quick. So this is St. Patrick's Single Malt, non-chill filtered, triple distilled cognac cask finished. And finding information about this bottle is actually really hard to do because you see here, there's supposed to be, supposed to be like a bottle number here, and it's just blank. Like someone just didn't write anything there. So, but for less than $30, 90 proof single malt, aged in a cognac cask, sounds good to me. And at some point, my mother-in-law brought in some cheese that has chocolate imperial stout in it. So I'm quite looking forward to that. All right, so the topic for today, for this live stream, and this is not at all really to do with St. Patty's Day, is the PLCB, also known as the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, Fine Good Spirits, and House Bill 2272. I believe I got that correct. And kind of just want to talk about all of that because I've gone on a few rants this past few weeks concerning that particular thing. And I just want to kind of talk about it and get it off my chest because I have a lot of thoughts about it and a lot of thoughts about the way things are done here in Pennsylvania. All right. So real quick, if you're here in the comments, go ahead and if you have any thoughts about the PLCB or the way things are done in Pennsylvania, go ahead and leave a comment down in the chat. Just you are okay with the way things are, or you're not okay with the way things are. Happy to hear that and want to hear more of what you have to say about this as well. So please talk in the chat. Please tell me what you think. Please tell me if you have any comments about the things I'm saying or the way that things are reading. We are going to actually look at this one bill at some point. And I also want to pull up some clips I have of the hearing that was done in front of the board. There was one public hearing that lasted for like almost 4 hours. I'm not going to go through that. That would be a mess. But there was another control board meeting, some sort of committee meeting to discuss it that actually had to go get passed in the PLCB before it could go to the House. Currently, it's not actually on the table for the House, but it could be brought up in a later session. But again, we'll talk about that in a minute. And I apologize to my normal viewers who are like, hey, I don't live in Pennsylvania. Why are you doing a thing about Pennsylvania? Well, I live here, and these things matter to me. Especially as someone who drinks a decent amount of whiskey and is purchasing bottles. The situation that we have here in Pennsylvania is something that I care about, and I know a lot of other people do care about. I know some people that would have liked to be here and to have talked about it, but weren't able to. But here we are. Okay, so let me go ahead and explain the situation here in Pennsylvania for those who don't know. There's a lot of states out there that are ABC states, that is alcohol control board states. They have some level of regulations on pricing or on assets, how liquor is sold, and there's different levels and different variations of how that all works. For instance, in Ohio, my understanding of how the way Ohio works is that all of the stores are technically state stores, but they're individually run. They're basically like a franchise model, and the assets, the actual liquor, is owned by the state. And so that's just like a hybrid model of the way things work. However, here in Pennsylvania, the way that things work is that the government, the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, has a complete monopoly. I'm going to use that word, but complete control is probably a little more unbiased way of putting it. Complete control on the wholesale and retail sale of liquor. And what I mean by that. So in the federally, we have a 3-tier system, right? We have the distillers, distilleries, the producers of the alcohol, the distributors, and then the retailers. And so the wholesale is referring basically to that second tier, which is the distributor. So all alcohol, when it comes into the state, basically goes through I should say all spirits, and I believe all wine. I'll double check about wine, but all spirits, all hard liquor, if you will, comes in through the PLCB, through the wholesale, and then through their stores. So all the stores here in Pennsylvania are called Fine Wine Good Spirits, and some of them are like premium, but they're all under that Fine Wine Good Spirits name. And those are all state-run stores. If you work at one of those stores, you are technically a government employee. And we'll get into kind of the ramifications of that later. Now, since all these stores are the same, all the prices are the same, and some people like that. All the prices are the same across the board. You go to any store and you're going to know exactly the prices. It's going to be the same as the price in your hometown. If you live in Pennsylvania and you're going to another store in Pennsylvania, and that seems all well and good. But there's also no competition. So when it comes to pricing is really up to the state. The state decides what the pricing is going to be. Within about a couple months ago, I can't remember exactly if it was, I think it was within this past year, there was a unilateral decision in the PLCB to make every single item that they sold, the price go up 4%. Didn't matter what it was, how the sales are going for that product or anything, just everything's going up 4%. And that has a big effect. One, obviously, it affects us as consumers on how much we're going to be paying for a bottle, but it also has an effect on other people. And this is specifically the makers of products within the state. And that's something I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion on, and is how this actually affects distilleries and other producers of alcohol. Because at least for distilleries, I can't say for wineries and breweries. I don't know how that'll work. Actually, not breweries wouldn't be affected because they don't really take care of breweries. But the PLCB does do wine. It does do does run all the hard liquor. And so distilleries are impacted because they are not allowed to sell alcohol from the distillery, like directly to the distillery for the consumer through vendor shows or anything that they're going through. So for instance, I actually have a second job at a distillery. It's not a whiskey distillery. I'm a whiskey tuber who works at a vodka distillery. And that's just like a side thing, just actually selling alcohol. And I'll talk about my experience with that and how that relates to some of the concerns that the current market of alcohol, the PLCB, later. But when these distilleries go out and they sell stuff at different places, say they have a tasting room, or if they have, like we said, we go out to vendor shows. We were just at the Home and Garden show here in Pittsburgh, and we were selling pre-canned cocktails, right? RTD drinks. And all the products that they make, those prices are determined essentially by the state. They don't have much of a say, except for what maybe that they sell to the distributor. So, which again is the PLCB. So the PLCB decides is the wholesale acquirer of alcohol in the state, but they don't have much of a say. And so when all of these prices went up 4%, these distilleries were forced to raise their prices too, because they're not allowed to compete against the PLCB when it comes to pricing. They can't be competitive, and they have to match them. Tasting rooms, vendor shows, whatever it was. Maggie's Farm Rum, which is a rum distillery here in Pittsburgh, they put out a notice on their Facebook and their social media saying, hey, we've never raised the prices on some of our products. There's some products they have just never raised their prices on. Maybe none other products they've ever raised their prices on. I don't remember exactly what the wording was. But they were forced to because of this 4% increase across the board in the PLCB in the state stores. So that's just kind of one of the examples that people of the problems that we have in the state. No competition to really set prices, and the distilleries have to basically just say go with whatever is set by the PLCB. So there's a couple problems there. Additionally, we've seen a lot of corruption in the PLCB in many ways, and it can break it down to all different ways we've seen corruption. It could take a while, but the biggest thing is recently some of the lottery items, specifically, I believe, some Pappy Van Winkle bottles that were not purchased. And how is it? So people won the lottery, but they never reached out and actually paid for it. So even if their credit card wasn't updated in their account, and so when they got charged, it didn't go through, and they had some time to fix it, but they just never did. And what's supposed to happen with those bottles is that they're supposed to repick from the lottery again. They're supposed to take whoever didn't win and just pick from those people. And instead, what happened was that some of the upper people in the PLCB took those bottles home with them. And some of the fines, I think the highest fine was only like $500, and the lowest fine was about $50. So there's a little bit of corruption there. Additionally, it is quite obvious when I talk to people that some people have inside connections to know when stores are going to get certain allocated items. So even though we have, I'd say, reasonable prices on certain items, I think some items we actually are over, we're pricing them higher than we should. Actually, most items I think we're pricing higher than we should. But when it comes to like unicorn bottles, we're still doing approximately MSRP or maybe a little bit more. So when we talk about Blanton's or H. Taylor or any of those kind of tater bottles, if you can get them, they are appropriate price. But actually knowing when to get them and what stores are going to have them, you have to basically have inside knowledge. When I was at the Home and Garden show and I was talking to people about our products and stuff, I ended up talking to some people about bourbon. And one of the people I was talking to was saying like, oh, like his normal bottle is Blanton's. I'm like, how are you getting Blanton's? Like, oh, well, I know a guy who knows when the bottles are coming in. And I'm like, you're not supposed to know that. And I mean, like, you're really not. You're not supposed to, like, it's not part of the policy for PLCB to allow for that kind of thing, to tell people, hey, when these are bottles going to coming in, and people have gotten fired over it. That being said, it still happens and happens regularly. So the question is it actually being enforced? And how much is being enforced? Is it only being enforced when people find out about it and complain about it? Or is it actually just being enforced across the board? And how do you really enforce that? So there's a few problems there. So when people say that, part of the reason they like Pennsylvania's system is that when they do get to a store that has Blanton's or whatever, they will have some sort of, they'll have a reasonable price. And that's fine if you can get it. But I feel like most of the average consumer is not going to be able to walk in and just know and maybe see that bottle. Seeing some comments here. Let's see here. So Daniel, so I'll pull this thing here from Daniel. He says about the state stores, it says abolish it. Abolish mine too. So he's in Virginia, and he says home state of Washington got rid of it while he was there. And it was great to have liquor in Costco and see more variety show up. So that is actually great to hear, because one of the things that got brought up during this meeting with the PLCB board is looking at Washington, because Washington is, in a lot of the people's minds that I'm watching those videos about, they think that Washington is actually an example of what goes wrong. So I'd love to hear more of your thoughts, Daniel, on that. Because so they went from being a ABC state to a private sector state, privatization state. And what they did to basically take care of revenue, which is an issue that all these states that are doing this have to go through, figuring out, hey, where we're going to get this new revenue from, is they just increase taxes. And so what ended up happening is that prices went up on all their bottles in the private sector, but that's only because there's so much tax that they had added to take care of these revenue streams. So that's something you have to worry about there. Reading through the comments here. So from one of our from Sue Devil, Sasquatch and Lily just finished closing their last government liquor board store last week. It's definitely way better for consumers. The private sector does alcohol sales better in every way. And that's kind of like one of the arguments too. Yes. So Daniel's confirming that, yeah, they did raise taxes. There are problems in West Virginia, but it seems to be, in my opinion, just looking at it, is that the reason there is a problem is because that's just what they did, just raise taxes, and because they're no longer the ones who control it. And it's just like a lack of transparency of prices. All right. Interesting. So something that Daniel, Daniel mentions here, seeing items sold at MSRP in Virginia, just like we are in Pennsylvania, but also means that nothing in high demand is ever on the shelves. And that's exactly it. So the question that a lot of people have to ask when it comes to about unicorn bottles is that would you rather see them regularly on the shelf for a higher price, or would you rather them be normal price but never be able to see them? That's kind of like what you have to. That's the what you have to go with. Something I was watching Bourbon Junkies earlier today, and something that they said that makes sense is you have 3 parts to whiskey. It probably has all spirits. You have good, so it's good price, and availability. You get to choose 2 of those. If something's good price, and it's not going to be available. If it's available and good, that means the price must be off. And if it's got a good price and it's available, it must not be good. Now, that's not true for everything. Obviously, there's bottles, and that's what we're trying to do on the show, is trying to show you bottles that that are available and are good and reasonably priced. But obviously, these are not absolutely fantastic, amazing whiskeys. We're not talking about some of these bottles that go for astronomical prices. And some of these bottles that go for these really high prices aren't even necessarily that good. They just have a lot of hype around them. Looking at certain Willet bottles. I know some, like the Purple Top's supposed to be really good, but I know other people complain about the pot still bottles and stuff. But so Daniel does mention here that he says that he loved to be able to find stuff at Trader Joe's and Costco. And that is probably one of my biggest frustrations as a whiskey tuber, is I would love to cover those bottles, but I can't. They can't do it here. In fact, they can't do it in Ohio either, because of the way that Ohio runs things. They can't sell them in Michigan because the way Michigan runs things. The closest state for me to go to Costco or Trader Joe's to get something is, I believe, Kentucky. But a lot of the nearby states don't allow that, or there's not a Costco or Trader Joe's in them. Spencer says like Eagle Rare. Yeah, so Eagle Rare is supposed to be like a $30, $31, $32. I'm not sure exactly what Spencer's replying to there, but that makes, Eagle Rare is like one of those like tater bottles that in some states you're going to see it for like 40, 50 or more dollars, but if you see it, like, hey, you're actually seeing it. Whereas in some of these other states that have it at a lower price, sometimes you're not going to see it on the shelf if they're listing it for MSRP. But maybe it's responding to the fact that I said some of these bottles aren't actually that good. I think Eagle Rare is good, but that's my thought. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I have a bunch of clips that I want to talk about. So I should actually probably give it some preface to it. So this is the PLCB complete control, and there's a lot of different factors, and people think that things are good, things are bad, and I think it has a lot to do with an opinion on how things are run and what the goal is of a private store. So there's pros and cons. I think everyone recognizes that. There's pros and cons to everything. I do want to thank the Pittsburgh Whiskey Friends group for allowing me to post that, one, and to get a lot of feedback on everyone's opinion. Majority seem to be against the government control here in Pennsylvania, at least the way it is currently, of alcohol sales. And there's a few people who are for it, and that's fine. That, as someone said, not every system, no system can be perfect, but it does seem that there's probably some systems that could be better than what we have currently. So one of the things that we have that was proposed early last year, like I think it was like January of 2022, so there's a possibility this may never go anywhere, is a House Bill 2272 in the House of Pennsylvania. Let me go ahead and pull that up real quick. This is the first time I've ever used StreamYard, so I have to figure all that out. Here we go. All right, so this is House Bill number 2272. This is the latest bill trying to get privatization here in Pennsylvania, and it is only 2 pages. If you want to read a bill, just read this one. It's the easiest bill I haven't read a whole bunch of bills, but this is an easy bill to read. Not a whole lot to it, and because here's what it is. Unlike previous bills that have tried to get through the government in Pennsylvania, where they're not only trying to change something. They're trying to change one thing. They are trying to like make all the ramifications for it. Like they're trying to get privatization, and also in the same bill deal with what we do about our buildings, what do we do with our assets, what do we do about different laws, what do we do about that we have to like change and get around, and what do we do about taxes and revenue and all things. This bill says, you know what? Let's put that aside. Let's stop worrying about that in the bill, and let's just put to the people, do you want the government to control alcohol sales? So what's proposing is a change here. Let me put it right here. We got Section 1. The following amendment to the Constitution of Pennsylvania is proposed in accordance with Article 11. I can read Roman numerals. It's fine. That Article 3 be amended by adding the subdivision to Here's the important part. The Commonwealth shall not manufacture or sell at wholesale or retail liquor. That's what we're looking to add. If it gets passed, so first it has to pass the General Assembly as an amendment, and then a bunch of stuff has to happen. Basically, then it goes to the voters. It would be a ballot question or a referendum type S question that we would get on our ballots at one of our elections, and we would say, yes, do we want this, or no, we don't want this amendment. If it gets passed by us as the constituents and as consumers, then the legislative branch of the government would have 18 months to decide how we're going to go about following that change. And there's a lot of problems, and I admit that there's a lot of problems with how we have to deal with things. There's a lot of things that you have to deal with and figure out if we're going to implement that sort of change. It's a big change. I recognize that. And that's what kind of gets brought up in the PLCB meetings, the board meetings that I pulled up. This is like, I can't remember the exact name of the board or committee that this is from, but there was a public hearing that had a bunch of testimony from different people who would be affected by this. One of them was the president of the union that all the members of the PLCB stores that are non-managers are part of, which also represents like grocery store workers and across the country and stuff. So this isn't like just a union for PLCB workers. It's a union for workers that have grocery stores and stuff like that. So there's from him. There's a few other different testimonies from different people, like the Association of Distilled Spirits Council, I believe it was called, something like that. So we're not going to go through that. We're not going to go through that hearing. But what I do want to pull up is the discussion from the actual vote to put this bill from the PLCB back in front of the House. And not because necessarily that this bill is actually going to get passed, because I honestly am not sure if it's ever going to get brought up again. I did ask the sponsor of the bill, or at least her office, what this current status was of the bill, and basically it's just that it was removed from table and hopefully gets brought up again, but there's no guarantee that it does. But the discussion around the bill is helpful to understanding what issues would come up if we went into a privatization system. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up, and we can, and I'll talk about it as we pull the different clips and discuss them. So the first clip I'm going to show you is the clip of the bill just being introduced.
1933, Governor Gifford Pinchot was in year 2 of his second term. Voters had overwhelmingly chose to end prohibition. The Pennsylvania General Assembly was called into a special session by the governor, who ran on a pro-prohibition ticket, to create a plan to move past the 13 years of prohibition in the United States. In a matter of days, the PLCB was born and touted as a rigid organization that would make alcohol inconvenient to access and expensive to purchase. Fast forward 90 years, and Pennsylvania is one of only 2 remaining states in the nation that has a government monopoly on the sale of alcohol. It is time once again to go back to the voters and let them weigh in. It is time for the citizens and for the taxpayers of Pennsylvania to decide what the role of their government should be. Our Constitution lays out the powers, rules, and structure of our state government. House Bill 2272 addresses whether selling alcohol should continue to be part of that role of our state government. To my fellow colleagues, the question before us today is whether we want to give Pennsylvanians the
All right, so I'm actually going to stop right there. There's not much more that I want to talk about there from that particular clip. And then before we get too far, I do want to try to say that I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible. What you'll see through some of these clips is that, and what ended up happening actually at the end of this meeting, was that this was a party line divide on this issue. I'm not going to say what parties. You can probably figure it out for yourself. And I'm not going to try to go. I'm not going to go into what my personal. You'll probably be able to figure it out as well as we talk. What my personal political leanings are, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. And I'm going to try to just kind of recognize the issues that people bring up with this, and also recognize the counter arguments, and try to understand both sides. And because I want this to be a discussion, so please go ahead and leave any questions or comments about what I'm saying or about what our representatives are saying in this video. So the first thing that came up in this discussion was how this change would affect the Johnstown flood tax. And kind of give some background to this, is the Johnstown flood tax is a tax that was implemented as an emergency tax to pay for the repairs in Johnstown due to the Johnstown flood. I'm not going to go into the details of Johnstown flood and the history of that, but basically there was a big flood, damaged the town a lot. Tax was implemented on alcohol to fix it. It is still in today, still being implemented today and still paid for today. Currently, it is an 18% tax that is applied to the sale of alcohol. It is already built into the price you see on the shelf. So when you see the price on the shelf, that actually includes the 18% tax that's being implemented for the Johnstown flood. So the Johnstown flood, just to give you an idea for timeline period, Johnstown flood, looking for the year. So the Johnstown flood itself happened in 1889, so pre-prohibition. But the tax was instated in 1936. So the flood itself happened a long time before anything else, but things kept kind of get built and rebuilt, and eventually we had to bring in other like U.S. Corps of Engineers in to get this fixed and everything. It was expensive, and that's fine. When it first started in 1936, it was actually only a 10% tax, and then increased up to 18%, I believe, by 1951. So in the course of about less than 20 years, it had the price increased, the tax rate increased. That tax is still being paid by us today here in Pennsylvania, and again is part of the pricing. So I'm just going to go ahead and play that video, kind of asking about the tax. So let me go ahead and show that. But there's some background to you. Here we go.
States, the Commonwealth shall not manufacture or sell at wholesale or retail liquor. Since the authorizing language of the Johnstown flood tax, Section 2 states, an emergency state tax is hereby imposed and assessed at a rate of 18% of the net price of all liquors sold by the board. The tax imposed shall be collected by the board and from the purchases of liquor from the board. Obviously, we can conclude without a doubt that the Johnstown flood tax or emergency liquor tax will end since the board would no longer be selling liquor. My question is, with respect to the $415 million in tax revenue, we need to find a solution for that. Are you in support of legislation for a new tax that would raise nearly $500 million into the general fund revenue?
So that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money being generated by this tax. If I understood him, what he said correctly, is about $500,000, so 400,000 plus. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. Now, my problem with this, and what he said there, is that the wording of the tax is that it's money. It's a tax on products sold by the board. So because the board is what actually sells product here in Pennsylvania, the wording specifically said the board. Now, I don't even know if, in my opinion, if that tax should still be implemented. There's as someone in the chat said, Johnstown's still broken. I'm not up on my Johnstown history. But if we're still fixing that after we're talking 100+ years at this point, we should really get something behind that, and especially if we're making $400 million a year off this tax. That's quite a bit. Now, if you want to keep that tax around, I think that's actually fairly simple. We've already gone through and increased that tax from 10 to 15 to 18% in the early life of that tax. Shouldn't be that hard to just pass a change to say, hey, reword that so that that tax is just applied to all alcohol sales. Now, people probably don't want that because that would increase the price of beer as well as wine outside the PLCB. So whatever the wording is, it shouldn't be too hard to change the wording to take that tax and reapply it to wherever they want it to. Again, I'm not sure if I'm for that, but that should be easy enough to do. Here's what Representative Mihalik responded with in that discussion about the Johnstown flood tax.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the revenues that are raised from the LCB, but just to be clear, today is just to allow the voters the opportunity to weigh in on whether or not we want government to be involved in the business, wholesale or retail, of selling alcohol. So the state right now has a $40 billion budget. We're here, it's June, it's budget month. We're going to vote to spend $40 billion taxpayer dollars. So if your question is, do we need more revenues for the state, then we should open up the market and watch the revenues grow. We have a 40% markup on all of our products. That money that you're talking about, taxes do not equal profit. So there's this contribution to the general fund, and I think it's a perceived contribution to the general fund because at the end of the day, those are Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars that are going into the general fund, and it funds various things. So if the question is, do we need to fill a revenue hole? Do we need to raise revenues in a already $40 billion budget? Then my answer would be that we should open up the market and watch the retail outlets grow and watch the sales grow as a result.
So something that Representative Mihalik stated a few times is that obviously in these 18 months that they have after the passing of this bill, there'd be a lot to do. And figuring out how to recoup some of that revenue is one of those things. During the hearing that they had with the PLCB board, actually, they were one of the testimonies. They were one of the people who gave testimony during the original public hearing. And the thing that they brought up is that they have a lot of, not only do they have the taxes, right? They have the tax money itself, which comes in and goes into the taxes that we pay as consumers into the government. But we also have the revenue that the PLCB makes. And that goes not only to funding the stores themselves and paying employees and everything, because it does pay for all that. Part of that also goes to various different groups like the police force, liquor enforcement, and everything else. So there's a lot of things we have to figure out. Like, how's this money going to, where's this money going to come from? But on the flip side, they are making money off this, right? They are. There's no competition, so they're going to make money off it. And they have a significant amount of money coming in. However, something that they brought up is that they have revenue that they are making that is not necessarily going into the general fund. I don't know, I'm not a politician. I don't know exactly how all the budgeting aspects works. I'm not an accountant either, so don't ask me about that either. But this revenue that is being held back, that's not being sent into the general fund. So we have, essentially they have extra money. And we can, now what we do with that money, who knows, but point being is that they're making revenue. And when we go to the privatization section, we are going to have to figure out how to recoup that money. And I completely understand that. We just have to see how it's going to be. As someone said in the chat, so they can easily regenerate that revenue through liquor licensing. So that's a red herring. Right. So there's different things that the problem that I saw through a lot of this is that there's no plan with this bill. And I think the reason, again, as I said before, is that the reason there's no plan for this bill or in this bill to take care of these things is that every time there's been a plan in a bill before, it just gets tied up. This bill's just saying, look, let's just get rid of it. Let's just put in the Constitution saying that we can't do this, and then we'll figure it out. Like, we'll be forced to figure it out. And as the chairman of this committee said, government gets things done when there's a pressure. And so that's the idea. It's like, hey, there's a deadline. And if there's a deadline, they'll get it done. So there's that. So pull up everything here. And so actually here, this is actually a response from Governor Mihalik on our 18-month that they have to, I keep saying Governor Mihalik, that's not accurate at all, to Representative Mihalik on this 18 months that they have.
Step once the voters approve.
So if the voters are telling the Pennsylvania General Assembly that it is time to rip the Band-Aid off and explore a private liquor system, then we're going to have 18 months, as the bill states, to come together in a bipartisan manner, as we do every day, and hammer out a plan and get it to the governor's desk for signature.
Yeah, and that's it. Just they'll have to figure it out. They'll figure it out. So one of the next issues that came up was the actual workers. So in Pennsylvania, there's obviously there's people who work in these stores. What about them? What's going to happen to them? And that's a legitimate concern. What do we do about the job loss that we're going to assumably see? So let's go ahead and pull that video up.
3,500 workers in the PLCB Fine Wine and Good Spirits stores that are covered under a collective bargaining agreement and receive a state pension.
Oh, sorry.
An accurate statement that we have that many employees within the system, that there are nearly 3,500 of them.
So there's 2,456 full-time state store employees right now. Of those full-time workers, about 800 of them are managers, and they're not within the union.
Okay, so that's a decent amount of workers. We're talking about, I think they said, I already missed the number. They said like 2,000 some workers, and they would be without jobs. We have a lot of jobs here in Pennsylvania. I looked up a number, and I don't remember what it was, but it was a much bigger number than 2,000. It was, I think it was like, I think about that. I don't say it was like 5 million. That seems like too high. But I'm going to go with it. 5 million jobs. There's a lot of jobs here in Pennsylvania. So we're talking about a small portion of jobs, and a lot of those jobs will come up again. Something that someone said during the hearing is that those jobs are just going to get kind of swept into an existing job. So if the supermarkets and grocery stores start selling liquor, they'll just have the employees who are working on that, maybe in the beer section or the cafe section, they'll just now have to start taking care of the liquor sales as well. So just going to sweep that under. There's not going to be any new jobs actually there. But at the same time, there's going to be new stores. There's going to be liquor stores that pop up. There's going to be like dedicated liquor stores. There's going to be custom stores specifically for liquor. But it also, you don't know that that's what's going to happen. You don't know that those jobs are going to be lost in that way, or that grocery stores are going to be able to sell it. During that 18 months, but the legislature will have the possibility to change and decide how they want stores to run, or how like the liquor code is going to be written, to possibly say, hey, this is the way you have to do things now. No, the government's not going to have be selling alcohol. We're not going to be doing wholesale or retail selling of alcohol, but they could say, okay, grocery stores still can't sell it. It's still to be sold in a store that's maybe dedicated to alcohol sales. Maybe they start letting beer distributors doing it, or something like that. There's going to be these kind of stores, and there's going to be more jobs opening. I understand that it probably won't be all of those jobs, but these are still our skilled workers, and we do have a need for workers in the state. So let me go ahead and pull up the next video, and that's talking about the pension liability. So this is the same the same representative who asked about our pension liability, because all these people who work in the state stores, they are, at least the full-time workers, they are part of the state retirement program pension. So they get a pension through the state, and so there's a liability there. And that's what this next one's about. So I pull that particular video up.
What the pension liability would be for all of those workers if we were to privatize?
Oh, yeah. So just, hey, what's going to happen if we privatize? What's going to happen to the pension? And so let me go ahead and to make it. I'm not sure I'm going to show this video because the response is basically, yeah, we have to figure that out. We have to figure out what the pension liability is going to be, and we have to figure out in that 18 months what we're going to do with it. That's the response. Just like everything else is, hey, in that 18 months, we'll have to figure it out. And I understand the frustration that like not having a plan in place because before making a change. But we're talking about, I think, a change that's more philosophical and ideological as far as like what is right and what's not right. And something that Governor, sorry, I keep saying Governor, I need to really stop. Something that Representative Mihalik brings up is that the PLCB is both the regulator of liquor sales and the exclusive retailer of liquor. So they both regulate and retail, and it's a conflict of interest. And I don't think many people would have I mean, there's definitely those people who probably do, but not many who would say, okay, the government shouldn't regulate liquor at all. And there will still be liquor regulations. We have regulations outside of the PLCB, let's say like they're enforced by the PLCB or as part of the PLCB, but outside of the state-run stores, there are rules, right? I have ramp certification. I took a course to say how to spot fake IDs, who I can and cannot serve to. How do I what my liability is if I break a rule. If I serve alcohol to a minor, if I serve alcohol to someone who's already intoxicated, if me serving someone alcohol and letting them get drunk and they go cause a car crash, there's a liability that I have as the person who serves them that alcohol. And so that's a regulation that's going to continue after if we privatized, right? So there's a lot of different liabilities here, and I think I might jump the gun a little bit on that one there on that conversation. But right now, as far as the pension, going back to the pension itself, I don't understand how pensions work. I don't get a pension for where I work. I have a 401k, but that gets paid into. But I don't fully understand how pensions work. But for my brief research and understanding of pensions is that the money is supposed to be the employer is putting money into a pool, and that pool then gets paid out. So that money should already be somewhere. That money should already be in some sort of account or something somewhere else. So when we talk about pension liability, why are we suddenly liable for a pension? That money should so exist already. So if the money doesn't exist already, what are we doing? Like, why haven't we taking those extra funds, that extra revenue that we've been generating, and putting it into the pension to make sure that the money is there to pay out all these people who have been working and have a pension? Something that Representative Mihalik also mentioned is that the average tenure of a full-time worker is about 6 years. So we're looking at an average of 6 years pension. Now, something that they did say is that we're looking at, I think they said $300 million liability in pension. So $300 million, that's a lot of money. That sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Don't let me neglect the fact that that's a lot of money. There's something else that she mentioned is that we're working on a $40 billion budget for the state. $300 million is still a significant portion. I'm not going to lie. That's still a lot, even in comparison to $40 billion. But we'd be able to figure it out. We'd be able to figure it out. Not to mention all the assets and things that would be sold off by the PLCB when they go privatized, and could pay for at least a portion of that. So moving on from the pension liability, next question is just, why is this bill so simple? I'm not going to go through everything, and I tried to be very clean with my cuts and my clips. But someone just asked, like, why is this bill so simple? Why is it so simple? And I think it's for what I said earlier, is that the previous bills that have tried to go through have been caught up in red tape, or not really red tape, but just disagreements on how to go about things and how to fix things after privatization. So that there's a previous bill was, this bill's 92 pages, right? Super simple, 2 pages. The previous bill, I think they said, was 92 pages, and studies were done to figure out like what the impact was going to be, and all these different things. And I think the point of this bill is say, okay, look, we've been trying to do this for so long that this is what we've been trying to do this for so long. This is just the easiest way to get it done. We ask the people, first off, do we want this? Do you want this? Do you want the government to be involved in alcohol sales or liquor sales? And they say, no. Okay, cool. People don't want it. We're going to get rid of it. Now, some people have responded saying, okay, we can't make it that simple, because it's not that simple. There's consequences for that change, and we need to make sure that the people know those consequences. And I completely agree that most people are not going to do their research on this. They're not going to understand all the different things that could be affected. Got it. So something one of our people says that he's talking about the liabilities in the accounting sense, as in the assets and liabilities. He's trying to make it sound ominous. Okay, so it shouldn't be ominous though, right? Like if, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we have liabilities and we have money for those liabilities, that money is just going to come out of the revenue that already exists, and then we don't actually have, it's not coming out of the general fund, right? The general tax dollars that the government uses for their budget, it shouldn't really matter. That should be taken care of. Now, so back to my other point that I was making, though, is that most people aren't like me, who are watching 5.5 hours of hearings and stuff on a single bill. I'm just a huge nerd about this particular issue, and just took a great interest. Most people aren't like me. Most people aren't going to know all the consequences, and except for through the advertising and stuff that's going to be done by those who are interested in trying to get the bill passed in the referendum. But let's face it, most people don't trust them because, well, they're not very trustworthy, and they're very biased. Yeah, so that's why it's so simple, right? That's why the bill is so simple. It's a simple question: should the government be involved or not? Is it really that simple? Maybe not. I'm not sure. So the next question is in safety concerns, and I kind of alluded to this question earlier when I talked about my ramp certification and everything. So let me go ahead and play. This next representative had like 4 different things he wanted to talk about, and then Representative Halleck just kind of responded in one stroke to the questions. So first, the thing he talked about was safety concerns, and I'll speak to that after I play the clip.
Issues that I believe we face. Everybody in this room has been around the block as far as visiting other communities and seeing in different boroughs, towns, and communities the effect that the proliferation of liquor stores has done to those communities and to those neighborhoods. And it concerns me greatly that we have, because we have a perceived need of tequila in a corner grocery store. I think the need that the people had for wine was legitimate in their corner grocery.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there before we get any further. Okay, so first off, he's recognizing that he's saying that even the PLCB stores in certain communities have caused problems. Okay, so sure. I'm not gonna just go with it for now. I'm not saying that's necessarily true, but we'll just go for it. And not see, but they're already there. I'm not sure if I understand fully the difference between them being there and them being in a corner grocery store. He also said that he understands the need for wine in those stores, and I'm like, okay, explain that. Why is it okay for us to need wine in the corner grocery store and not need liquor? Like, it's just 2 different preferences. In my opinion, at least. I think people, obviously some people are looking for things just to get drunk, and I get that, but people also do, that's why some people drink light beer. People will just get a case of beer because it's cheap, and they'll just down that, and people do that with wine too. They'll just get, yeah. So I don't understand how we could say that wine is okay, but liquor is not. Moving on, let's go ahead and watch the rest.
stores. I just do not see this as necessary. I have my son worked in a state liquor store, and I found it interesting that a lot of the people that work in them, as Representative Malagari noted, are long-term employees, people that are interested in their pensions, in their long-term employment, and interested in their health care benefits. The people that are going to be, with all due respect, that are going to be operating the sale of liquor in these corner grocery stores or in these outlets that will be up and down streets in our communities, these 18-year-olds aren't going to have a big concern about who they serve, when they serve.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there again. Okay, so one, previously they had mentioned that about job loss, right? And then this representative says, okay, now these stores are going to be up and down our streets. Who's running these stores? Because clearly there's going to be some jobs coming back then. If we're going to see stores up and down our streets, which is more stores than we have now, someone's going to have to run them, so there's going to be jobs there. Second, he's talking about, okay, these are 18-year-olds running their stores. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, 18-year-olds get jobs and they work these stores. That's fine. They're not going to be concerned. Yeah, they will be. They will be, because they have to go through the same ramp training I do. If they, they'll have to go through the same train. If they're selling alcohol, they'll have to go through the same processes that everyone else has to. If you're a waitress or a waiter at a restaurant and you're serving drinks or taking drinks from the bar to the table, you have to go through this ramp certification. There's consequences if you serve someone something, and those consequences are severe. On top of that, if you talk about the current liquor control enforcement, the way that they do liquor control enforcement, something that Mihalik brings up, she may have already brought it up, or maybe it's something later and I might be getting ahead of myself, is that the liquor control enforcement is not allowed to go into state stores. So Fine Good Spirits, they're not allowed to go in there. The only people who are allowed to basically discipline Fine Good Spirits employees for or report Fine Good Spirits employees is Fine Good Spirits / the PLCB. So not only they're a monopoly who on both retail and regulation, so they regulate liquor and they sell liquor, but they're also self-policing. If we change that system to say, okay, we do have private stores now, the liquor enforcement control system, I don't remember what they're called exactly, they'll be able to go into those establishments and ensure that everything's done properly. If they're not done properly, there is criminal, not just like a fine, to be clear here. Like what we learn in RAMP is that if something happens where you serve to a minor, or you serve someone alcohol and get them to the point of intoxication and they have an accident, something happens, it's not just a fine, it's a criminal charge. And that's significant, not just to you, but there's also liability to you as a person who served them, and a liability to the establishment that you work for. So there's significant penalties. So let's go ahead and resume that clip. I'm not sure there's much else to say from that one.
I learned from my son, there's a policy in the liquor control system of one and done for an employee.
Okay, yeah. So there's a one and done system in the PLCB for a store. You mess up once, you're out. Okay, it's still the PLCB policing itself. It's up to them. If we're talking about the concern of the community, I'm not sure we want the same people who are making the mistake disciplining the mistake. And I'm glad that policy exists, and all stores should have that policy. But still,
if you serve one person underage one time, you're out. You're done. You're not going to have that existing in I don't believe, in a corner grocery store.
You could absolutely have that. That could be part of the new liquor code that you guys have that 18 months to figure out. If you care about that much, try to get that in there. Try getting that part of the policy that for the new liquor code. You mess up once, you can't do that anymore. Like maybe you have to what the wording is. I don't know. You have to figure that out.
To get a bottle of tequila, to get a bottle of gin, to get a bottle of rum. I don't think there's a big need for that. And sure, we could find that out in the constitutional amendment.
Right. So it's just, I found that there's a lot of problems and assumptions in that aren't necessary. We don't know if corner grocery stores will be allowed to serve alcohol. And it's definitely some assumptions there that are absolutely untrue, that there will be no repercussions for, or, you know, no one's going to care. They're going to care because that's a current thing in place. If you serve alcohol, you can get in trouble if you serve it to the wrong person. That's criminally important. My mic pack keeps slipping. Got to change that where it's at. So same representative. Let me go ahead and we're going to talk about a few other privatization risks. So let me go ahead and pull up that clip.
CDC concluded that the privatization of alcohol sales will result in a reduction in the enforcement of sales regulations, including enforcement of the minimum legal drinking age. And it goes on to say privatization commonly results in increases in the number of off-premise outlets throughout all neighborhoods and in days and hours of sale, all of which have been known to increase in alcohol consumption to excess and the related harms that result. So looking at the numbers, besides the increased crime in the neighborhoods, which study after study, you can look at some studies just recently in Baltimore of the effects of those increased stores and how it's affected those neighborhoods, and how would we like that in our neighborhoods. But in seeing that increase in liquor outlets and the increased need for enforcement, we are looking at, with this system, eliminating $29.3 million to the state police.
Okay. So there's a couple things to dissect there. Also, I really need a haircut. If you can't, I'm gonna make this a little bit. It's a bit of a serious issue, so let's go ahead and make a little bit of joke. I need a haircut. This is the longest it's ever been. I wore it long in high school, and this is longer than it was in high school. So, yeah, I was part of. No, I won't get into that. Okay, so this is legitimate, right? CDC puts out studies, and there's studies all the time, and I think this is a legitimate concern. How is this going to affect the communities that we live in? Is this going to lead to more violence? Is it going to lead to more alcohol abuse? And that's a concern. I want to be honest with that. Like, alcohol abuse is absolutely a concern, and it's something that we need to be concerned about. And we don't, I don't want to encourage it. I think that when it comes to the drinking of our alcohols, we need to have a healthy attitude towards it, and we need to check in with ourselves, make sure that we aren't abusing it. Not everyone's going to agree with me, and that's say what you will, but that's my personal take on it. And if we're worried about how it's going to affect a community, like, yeah, we want to be concerned about that. But again, that's something that they can still put regulations on. The removal of the sale of liquor does not remove the responsibility of the state to do some level of regulation. They can still regulate the way they wish. I mean, we still have laws in place to how late bars can open or can serve alcohol and those kind of things. If they want to start regulating the time that liquor stores can close, they can do that. I'm not saying I'm necessarily in support of that. I'm just saying that's something they can do. It is not an argument to prevent the change. There's something at the end there, and I kind of forget what it was now. The revenue to the police for the liquor enforcement. Just like all the other fundings, there's going to have to be a way to bring that money back in, right? What that's going to look like, who knows? But they can put something in place. There's definitely ways for them to do that. So let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to go to the next thing he asked about, which is education funding. Actually, I'm not going to pull that up. I'm just going to pull up the last thing. So he asked about education funding, like where's the money going to come from for educating against alcohol abuse, and not it wouldn't be DARE because that's drugs, but things like that, like understanding, hey, you need to make sure that you're careful with your alcohol. So I'm just going to move on actually to the last clip of this representative in his last question, which is basically about funding. Like how are we going to do funding?
Have the elimination of that funding that I referenced from the state police, from the education grants and the Department of Drug and Alcohol Prevention, and is there a comment as to the effects that we're going to be facing in our neighborhoods as a result of the proliferation of these liquor stores up and down our communities?
So again, up and down our communities. Well, I'm not sure I'm entirely against that in some sense. Competition and more availability, all that kind of thing, what leads to what consumers want, right? And one of the things that got brought up a lot is the PLCB as a retailer is not necessarily working in the consumer's best interest. And I think that a lot of us in the I think most of us can say that we are not necessarily being taken care of when it comes to what we have as consumers or what we want as consumers. And one of the testimonies is that, like, well, when the private sector takes care of things, like they're gonna figure it out. That their livelihoods are on the line to figure out what consumers want and to get it to them for a price that the consumer can actually afford. So if you're looking at it from the consumer perspective and making sure that we're taking care of consumers, privatization seems more like the way to go, where instead of having a system in place or a PLCB in place where they're both regulating and selling, and they have mixed interest here. And even when they are looking to sell and sell a lot, their hands are bound in a way, and the money is not going, in the end, they're looking just to get sales in for revenue. So here is Representative Mihalik's responses to this particular representative, whose name I did not catch, but he had a lot to say. So she just kind of gave all of her responses in one.
With the employees, because you did mention that you have a relative who was working in a state store, and those people care about healthcare and pensions and all of that. And I just want to point out a statistic that I got from the LCB is that the average length of employment for a state store worker is 6 years. I think that the next, you asked about the public safety element of the potential to privatize liquor. I think the best way to keep alcohol out of the wrong hands is to take it out of the state's hands. Did you know from your relative's experience in the LCB store that the LCE, the Liquor Control Enforcement Agents, cannot go
That's something I talked about
into
earlier.
a state store to actually enforce the liquor laws? It is a self-policing government monopoly. They have to tell on themselves if they've made a mistake, if they've made an error. What is the consequence for that? If you're talking about a private licensee, there's an economic and a criminal consequence to selling to an underage. Since 2016, when we created the wine expanded permits under Act 39, there has not been one incident of a private licensee selling to an underage individual.
Not one reported incident. There still could have been an incident, and I'm going to admit that right. Muted myself. That's embarrassing. So that's all she really kind of goes on to talk about, and that's all we really needed to talk about there. They've already answered the funding question, and which is we'll figure out to figure it out. I think that's fair. After that, a couple more questions were asked about the actual vote to the voters to figure out, hey, do they want to use, or do they want the government to be involved, and the philosophy for Representative Mihalik's personal philosophy on the government being involved. And her response is basically just like, I don't think they should be involved in the sale and retail as well as being also the regulators. And I think that's understandable. I think it's perfectly understandable. One of the next representatives that we're going to bring up, he brings up a lot of different points. He brings up 5 points that were reason why he doesn't think that, well, he says 5 points. I don't know if it's actually 5 points, why he doesn't think that we should go through with this. I'm just going to play this. He gets a bit not enthusiastic. Emotions run high a little bit for him. So you'll see he's got a lot of emotions behind this, and for good reason. He's stated in the hearing that his family had to deal with alcoholism, or it runs through his family, and so it's understandable that that's going to make tensions run a little higher around this particular subject for someone with that background. But let's go ahead and pull that up. Let's see. We got to find the right one. Here we go.
Welby said, these are my 5 reasons why I'm against this bill. Public safety. There's nothing in this bill that talks about public safety. There's nothing in this bill that talks about a 17-year-old kid selling tequila to somebody underage. There's nothing in this bill that says that. There's nothing in this bill that talks about selection. And regardless of the intentions of the maker of the bill, they cannot guarantee that the selection that we currently have will stay the same. It's a difference between having thousands of bottles in our liquor board system and a shelf at the local Wawa. I mean, there's just no guarantee that the maker of this bill can say that Pennsylvanians will have more selection. In fact, in my opinion, I think we'll have less selection. There's also nothing in this bill that talks about price hikes, Mr. Chairman, and there's nothing that the maker of this bill can point to that will protect Pennsylvanians in regards to the price hikes that Pennsylvanians will find when we go into a privatized market, as the citizens of the state of Washington are currently experiencing. Also, Mr. Chairman, there's nothing in this bill that talks about the profits that the PLCB makes. Again, $2.1 billion in annual sales, transferring close to $500 million to our general fund balance. There's nothing in this bill that talks about how do we replace that, how to replace the funding that goes to alcohol and drug programs like those programs that help my family. And finally, Mr. Chairman, there's nothing in this bill that goes to the job losses. Mr. Chairman, these are real. These are voters, people who live in our
All right, so again, he kind of goes off a little bit on that. I'm not going to kind of play any more of that particular clip. So he brought up a couple things. And a lot of the things have been addressed in previous comments. But the one thing he did bring up that I don't think I've actually addressed yet is selection. During the public hearing, it was made clear that, at least from the PLCB, that they feel like they have a pretty good selection. And I think we have a decent selection across the state. However, one thing I've noticed, a couple things. One, there are some things that we should have available to us that we just don't. And even looking at some of the other surrounding states like Ohio, like often if I'm looking for something and we don't have it, I'll look at Ohio and guess what? They have it. And also what I've noticed is that often it feels like while we may not have it on this side of the state here in Pittsburgh, Philly has it. So that this seems a bit unfair, and so I'm not sure how distribution is decided, say which stores get what, but it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like they have more thing. Maybe we're just drinking more here in Pittsburgh and our side of the country, our side of the state, but there's definitely feels like they always have what we're looking for over in Philadelphia, or the Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. So selection, I think here is, and here's the thing about the selection in Ohio compared to Pennsylvania. I think Ohio, at least as far as whiskey is concerned, has a better selection overall throughout the state, right? But I do think, and I can understand this argument as well, that store-to-store selection, it varies way more in Ohio than it does here in Pennsylvania. Even some of the smaller stores, you can pretty much rely on certain products being at some of the smaller stores, and they have a decent selection, even at the really tiny 2-aisle stores like the one on Ohio Street here in Pittsburgh. It's tiny, but there's still stuff there. And some of the bigger stores that we have definitely have a great variety of selection too. But I think overall, the the selection in Pennsylvania is not as good as other states who have gone away or gone to some different model. And again, if we go to a privatization system, the consumers are going. The consumer demand is what's going to drive what stores put in place, right? So is a lot of these stores going to stock a lot of Jim Beam and Jack Daniels as far as whiskey is concerned? Yeah, those are big sellers. When it comes to the general consumer, that's a big seller. But also, there's going to be stores that are going to be specialized. There's going to be stores that that have a target market, like us whiskey drinkers, who know that we want these bottles, and we want A.H. Taylor, we want Buffalo Trace, we want Eagle Rare, and we also want Old Forester and Old Forester 1920 and 1910 and the 1890. I can't remember all the different bottles. We want Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. And by the way, I'm mentioning a lot of whiskeys I've actually never consumed, just because just whiskeys I know that people want. Even like there's a lot of products I've actually even seen on whiskey tube shows that make it very clear to me that we don't actually have a wide selection outside of the big companies. So, for instance, 13 Colony, we don't have that here. I don't think we do. Correct me if I'm wrong. If we do have it, I apologize for making a inaccurate statement. And Starlight. I think I have seen Wyoming. And I've seen like one, maybe two. No, I've seen a decent amount of Balcones bottles. But it definitely depends, and it definitely depends on which stores we go to. But I definitely think there's a lot of other distilleries though that are getting bigger that we're not seeing because the state takes a while. And that's the other thing, and that's actually a good point right there, is that often when it comes to allocated bottles and actually coming to Pennsylvania, or drops like Ardbeg committee releases here in Pennsylvania, those releases come so much later than the rest of the country. People will be talking about the B batch of Electric Barrel Proof, and we're just now getting the A batch, so we're behind. And so there's definitely some efficiency there in how we deal with things, and that's just not isn't going to happen in a more privatized sector where we're trying to get things to consumers that they want. Right? That's what the private sector wants to do. They want to get to the consumer what they want. So the section is better in private models, but even better are the sales prices and bonus loyalty card structures. Drives competition and make shopping really fun. Okay, yeah. So I mean, I enjoy shopping sometimes, but yeah, there's going to be competition. So if you have multiple different stores competing, they're going to have to try to get their sales lower to get people to buy their stuff instead of somewhere else. And that's the way it is with grocery stores too. Like we don't have government-run bread stores. We don't have government-run egg stores, and then but we do have regulations on those kind of things. I'm not sure about bread, but eggs, and at least here in Pennsylvania, we have state minimums. Say what you want about state minimums. I don't care for them either, or I don't care for them either, and either against PLCB. But those are regulations that are in place. There are regulations that you can do. So just because you're going to a private system doesn't mean that regulations go out the window. Let me see if there's any of these clips I wanted to talk about. She responds to several of those things. So let me just go ahead and let Representative Mihalik, and I apologize if I'm not saying her name right, but I believe I am, respond to those concerns. So first, the safety response.
First point that you raised was the public safety aspect of it. And I believe that if we're serious about public safety, the best way is to take this out of the state's hands. This is a self-policing government monopoly that has to tell on itself. Our liquor control agents cannot go in there. They can go in to any one of those stores that you mentioned in your remarks, and they can fine and they can assess criminal penalties on the license holders who are selling to underage. And again, as with the expansion in Act 39 of the wine expanded permit holders, there has not been one, since 2016, there's not been one instance of selling to an underage because there are real
consequences. So she says there at the end. There's real consequences. John McKisson says, kids selling tequila and underage kids, this isn't 1950 anymore. I understand that that's a concern that people have, and that's perfectly reasonable to be concerned about the wrong people getting alcohol and everything. But again, those regulations are already in place. We don't have to wait for we don't have to wait for these 18 months for them to make more regulations. These regulations are already in place. They do this. Someone sells underage, someone who's underage alcohol. There is a criminal penalty. And I don't think I'm not going to keep emphasizing that. This is not just a fine. This is not just like, oh, hey, a slap on the wrist, like they gave to the people who basically stole from the consumers in the PLCB when they sold lottery bottles and kept them for themselves. $50 slap on the wrist, $500 slap on the wrist. We're talking, and obviously this is definitely a more serious offense in that they are, we're talking about safety and stuff. We're talking criminal charges, not just a fine, criminal charges if you serve the wrong person. They're serious problems. And here's the other thing. The other person, I just kind of realized this myself. The other person said, the other representative said that it's a one and done system, right? It's a one and done system if you, in the PLCB, if you sell to someone who's underage. Okay. Where's the criminal charge? Maybe there is one. Maybe I'm misinformed or uninformed about that particular section. But where's the criminal charge? Where's the criminal charge in this? If on the one done system. So the next response then was to the response about selection, which is something that is something that I think is worth talking about because as someone who has a wide variety, and not just in what I drink, but what I'm looking for and everything. Like I drink pretty much any kind of whiskey you can think of, and I do have a particular niche, obviously, of under $35. I want a wide selection. There's a lot of things that we don't have here in Pennsylvania that other states do. Like I said, I mean, I'm going on a trip to Ohio tomorrow to get a bottle of the Powers Irish Rye whiskey. Because because I think that sounds awesome. I like Eric, for example, loves rye and he loves Irish whiskey, so this for him is like what. But on top of that, it's not sold here in Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of other things too that are in Ohio. They're not here in Pennsylvania, and they're not fully privatized either. They do have a hybrid model where the assets are owned by the state, and but the liquor stores still are able to kind of ask for certain items. The prices are set by the government and everything, but it's still, in my opinion at least, a better model than what Pennsylvania has, and allows for different experiences and different retailers to figure out what they want to do. So let's go ahead and look at this video about this clip about selection.
Next point you brought up was the selection, that you think that there will be less of a selection under a private system. So I just want to say that the average state store size is about 5,400 square feet, and it varies if you're in the middle part of the state, the east or the west. And we've got 5,000 products in the premium stores. And we don't have many premium stores. We've got 3,000 in the bigger stores and 900 in the small stores. I'm just going to pick out two random retailers here that operate in other states with much success. Total Wine, 25,000 square feet with 14,000 products. Again, our stores are 5,000 square feet. You're talking about 25,000. Bevmo, 10,000 square feet, 6,000 products. So I think that we're going to have a lot more selection. We're going to have choices, and we're going to have convenience for our consumers under a private system. You mentioned prices briefly. And I think I said this before, but there's a 40% markup on our products at the LCB. I think you brought up Washington State. They increased their taxes, not the prices. Some of the numbers I just want to correct for the record that you brought up about the contribution into the general fund. It is $185 million when you're not talking about taxes.
Kind of unmute myself out of those. So the point that she brings up is just other stores who are, that's what they do. They sell alcohol, Total Wine, Bevmo, everything like that. I think we can fully expect that those kind of organizations will absolutely try to get into the state if we go to privatize. And they're probably trying to lobby for, they probably are trying to lobby for one of these kinds of bills to get through, and that's just it's kind of obvious that they're gonna try to do that. And I do think that there may be a little bit of cherry picking there to say, oh, like, how many of these stores are actually going to come in, and where are they going to be, right? So something to note actually what the PLCB mentioned is that they have a few stores that actually don't make money. I want to at least acknowledge that, because that actually seems like something that the PLCB is doing correctly is that they have stores in rural areas that they're putting there so that there is availability and selection to the people out in these rural areas, even though it's actually costing them money. So in a sense, they're doing the right thing. Again, I don't think that should be necessary. I think we should, again, let the private sector kind of figure that out and say, hey, look, people don't drink out here. They don't want drinks out here. There's not enough market value here to make it worth it. So pull out. So yeah. I'm trying to think what else she said here about selection, but I think overall, and I think I think the selection is going to be better. It's going to be better, and I think we've kind of harped on that a bit enough at this point. So one of the things that that Mihaly does bring up, I'm just going to play the clip and we talk about it actually, but she talks about border bleed here, basically like Pennsylvanians going to other states nearby to get alcohol, which I'll just play the clip and then I will talk about that a little bit more.
Anybody's brought up border bleed out in the southeastern part of the state, border bleed accounts for 45% of the liquor sales. 45%. At best guess, it's $200 million on an annual basis. We would have those repatriated sales because there would be no need to cross the border in places like Philadelphia, going into New Jersey, going into Delaware, because there is choice, there is convenience, and there are lower prices. 48 other states have figured out a way to do this. And lastly, I think that you brought up the workforce.
To be clear, real quick, she says 48 other states. What's the other one that she's not mentioning because it's not us? The most strict state when it comes to alcohol is Utah. If you think about Utah, you can probably figure out why it's the most strict state. And if you don't, just look up the #1 religion in Utah, and they'll probably tell you why it's the most strict. So follow after Utah, that then comes us.
And I'll just reiterate a couple of my points from earlier. We're talking about 2,456 full-time employees who've got skill and expertise to go out in a private system and actually use their.
Okay, I don't want to talk about that, so we'll just get rid of that. So border bleed. This was it's always been an issue, and she mentions the southeastern part of the state. I would argue that, as my own testimony, that's a problem on this side of the state too, with Virginia and Ohio and Maryland, even not Virginia, West Virginia, being so close to us. There's other options there. Over on that side of the state with New Jersey, I don't know what the situation is in New Jersey why prices are so much better in New Jersey. But I know for Delaware, it's not just liquor. They talked about during the hearing that it's not just liquor, it's pretty much everything, because in Delaware, apparently there's no sales tax. So no sales tax means lower prices. And people, in the example, said that people go over there to buy their car, they go over there to buy their washer, they go over there to buy pretty much everything. So yeah, I think that people are definitely going to be border bleeding for that. I don't know how we're going to be able to combat that, even in a privatized system, because we're going to have to apply taxes to make up revenue. To pay for police forces and stuff. Yeah. I was gonna make a comment, but I realized I probably shouldn't, because that's just getting a little too political and not really what the goal of this conversation is supposed to be. And even on this side of the state, so looking at Ohio. So again, I talked about how I feel like Ohio has a better selection overall as a state. Maybe not best selection per store, but at least overall as a state, they have a better selection. On top of that, their prices are better. Ohio's prices are better. I have not done this. I have not bought anything in Ohio that I can't get here. Sorry, I've only bought stuff in Ohio that I can't get here. If I can get it here, I get it here. I have not purchased anything in Ohio that I yet, at least, that I can get here. I'm not saying I wouldn't. I'm saying I haven't. Just hasn't happened yet. Because usually my main goal when I go to Ohio to get liquor is to get things I can't get here for the show, to try new things and stuff. But I was looking through the sales list for Pennsylvania this month, and it's like, okay, these prices seem interesting, and okay, the sale price is good. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to be going to Ohio soon. Is it worth it? Is that actually like a better deal in Ohio? Not a single item that I compared from our sales listing. Again, I'm looking at certain things. Like I'm cherry picking things that are in our price category and everything, and just whiskey. But not a single one of the things I looked at was cheaper in Pennsylvania on sale. Like everything, every time I compared, everything was cheaper in Ohio, even against our sale price. And just to give an example of something that is always more expensive, to an insane level, I think. And this is actually appropriate for today, because today is St. Patrick's Day. So thank you all to you for being here. Jameson Black Barrel. Actually, I should just do Jameson. Let's just talk about Jameson. That's normal old Jameson whiskey. Let's see. Finally get spirits and pull up both sites. Okay, they're telling me I signed out. Yeah, that's fine. I don't care. So let's pull out a bottle of Jameson here in Pennsylvania. It costs right now on sale. It costs $31.29. So usually it's $33.29. The reason for that weird 29 number is because they did a 4% across the board raise on all prices, which led to weird numbers. But $31.29 currently here in Pennsylvania on sale. On sale. In Ohio, a bottle of Jameson whiskey costs $29. Not on sale. Jameson Black Barrel, just to kind of, I will admit, I've seen this mostly with Irish whiskeys, where I don't know why. Like, I don't know why Irish whiskey is so much cheaper in Ohio, but also Ohio has a way better selection of Irish whiskey, at least in my price category. So take that for whatever you want to take it for. Jameson Black Barrel. I always thought this was an expensive bottle because in Pennsylvania it is. Jameson Black Barrel in Pennsylvania costs $44.69. So we'll say it's $45. That same bottle in Ohio costs $34.99. That's $10 cheaper. Or not, I'm talking about $10 on a $100 bottle, right? We're not talking about $100 to $90. Like, that's whatever. We're talking like almost 25% cheaper. Math, it's probably, we'll say 20%, somewhere between there. It's significantly cheaper in Ohio than it is in Pennsylvania. And that's still a store that has a lot of control, a lot of state control. And when I talk to people on about prices from other states and everything, and I talk to them about what's going on, talking about their prices and stuff, it always feels like Pennsylvania is more expensive. Now, maybe it's just because I'm talking to people and they're trying to brag about how cheap their whiskey is. For instance, Josh and Aaron keep on Stuff and Whiskey. If you guys watch that channel, they've mentioned a few times how like their Evan Williams 1789 is like $13 or less or something around there, and it's $20 here, which I think is a reasonable price. Actually, $20 here is perfectly fine to me for that bottle. But if it was $13, I'd have like 5 backups of that bottle. But we talk about these representatives saying that things will be more expensive if we do a product, and I don't think that's true. I think certain things will be more expensive, things that we can't see, right? So, like during the hearing, one of the representatives mentioned that when they go to other states, they even mentioned that they said there's certain unicorn bottles. So they are aware about unicorn bottles. They are perfectly aware about what unicorn bottles are. They're like, these unicorn bottles in other states are like 4 to 10 times as much money as they are in Pennsylvania. Well, of course they are. You can't get them here in Pennsylvania. Like, you can get them if you have inside connection, like I mentioned really early in this stream. If you know when balls are going to be released and you have an inside connection, yeah, you're going to figure that out. People have gotten fired over that, which is, I think, appropriate because that's not, you're cheating the system. people have, and actually, let's harp on that a little bit. That's what happened in Oregon recently, right? They were rerouting bottles in certain locations, and they had inside people, and the higher ups were like, "Okay, these are where we're going to send the locations. We're going to go there. We know the whiskey's there. We're going to get those fancy unicorn bottles, and we're going to take them home with us." And they got a lot of trouble for that and got fired and stuff. Much more significant, by the way, much more significant punishment than what we gave here in Pennsylvania for someone doing a very similar thing with the lottery bottles. So, yeah, and now at this point, I've lost my train of thought on what I was going to talk about earlier, as far as pricing and stuff. Oh, unicorn bottles. So say that things are 10 times more. So even if you have to be able to find them, right? And the question is that I think we as whiskey consumers really, and consumers of anything that's rare and allocated and stuff, we have to ask is, what would we rather have? Would we rather have prices be around the suggested retail price, but you have to work really hard to get it, or just be lucky? You just have to be straight up be lucky. Or would we rather it be regularly available on the shelf, or at least more readily available, more likely to be on the shelf at a higher cost? Personally, and well, I'm never going to be drinking most of those bottles. The closest thing it's going to come to for me would be like Eagle Rare, which again, I actually do enjoy. I have a bottle here that I've had for about 4 years now, because I just haven't been drinking it. I drank it once for the show, and that's the last time I drank it. So the last time I drank that bottle was for one of our earliest episodes. Please don't watch it. It's an awful episode. But I think I'd rather see it just go for a little bit more and have more of a chance to see it if it's just going to be a little bit more expensive. Even more expensive, even if it's like significantly more expensive. I totally understand a store wanting to sell it for more and get more money for it, because it's in such high demand. That's the way it works. Supply and demand. Demand goes up, supply goes down, and also prices go up on this because it's worth more. That happened so much. I think I didn't talk about earlier about border bleed, because it's part of the conversation, right? About pricing and everything. Is that if you remember during the pandemic, there was a significant amount of border bleed. But yeah. So you're gonna real quick before I go on to that. As Scott says, so Scott's one of the admins at PWF, Pittsburgh Whiskey Friends, and he's great, and he runs our clubhouse. He actually doesn't live in Pittsburgh anymore. A jerk for leaving, but he's great. So as he says here, the high cost is what keeps it readily available on the shelf. Yeah, exactly. If it's low cost, you're not going to see it. If you figure out, you know where it is, I think you're cheating. You're kind of cheating the system. Someone's getting inside knowledge, and it's not benefiting the regular consumer. It's benefiting insiders, people who are in the know. So it's not fair. It's just not a fair system. I would rather things just be more highly costed, but also be able to get it. That's what I would prefer. And each store can do things differently. Some stores will still do lotteries, and that's absolutely fine. If you want to buy the bottle at SRP, they'll do a lottery to buy the bottle at SRP, or they'll include it in bundles and all these other things. And whatever drives the market, the privatization market, to get the bottles out there the way they want to get there and drive, consumers to their store, that's great. Yeah, whatever they want to do, I'm totally okay with that. Let's go through these, see if there's anything else I wanted to discuss. Okay, here's one thing that is here's a legitimate, I think, a question to be asked and to be discussed about what would happen, what we have to do, what we have to respond with if we went to a private system, and it has to do with our lease agreements.
And one of the things that's going to pop up are warehouse leases, where many of my people work. Do you have any type of a plan, or are you aware of the warehouse leases and the ancillary effects to pulling out of our leases early, and the effect they'll have on the state's revenue?
Yeah, and
So before she gets into her answer, I'm not sure I'll play it or not. So actually, because I think what she says is that we would have to figure that out. Just like which is and I understand why it's her response to a lot of these questions, is that we have to figure it out because it's built into the bill. There'll be 18 months for the legislation to figure this out. The question here, actually, that's not a question. It's just a kind of a thing I heard on one of the other hearings, in the public hearings, is that a lot of our lease agreements, supposedly, and I can't verify this, but this was said during the public hearing, that a lot of our lease agreements actually have a stipulation in there that if something happens like this, like them not being able to do business anymore, they're actually free and clear of their lease agreement. Now they'll have 18 months to, again, they also have 18 months for them to allow their lease, the companies that have their leases to figure out what they want to do. Hey, okay, you need to get out so we can put someone else in to find new tenants and stuff. But if that's correct, we're free as far as the taxpayers are concerned. As far as we're concerned about money being spent by the government, if that is true about the lease agreements, we're free and clear. We don't have to worry about it. So, whatever. Let me see if there's anything else in this clip I want to highlight.
And again, that would all have to be decided within those 18 months. I mean, I
Right, 18
think
months,
as
yeah.
legislators, we all know that there are leases, there are state-owned assets, there are other businesses involved, and that'll be part of the second step in this entire process. But the first step is actually getting it started.
Yeah. So it's basically what we're seeing already. And that's, so you mentioned assets. We will have assets that we will need to something else that we'll have to deal with, and that's the assets are something that we can actually sell either to whatever stores move in. And we're in an 18-month period, right? During the 18-month period, if I understand things correctly, they have 18 months for everything to get implemented. So theoretically, those the Final Good Spirit stores could still actually run for those 18 months, and they can actually coexist with other stores. And eventually, whenever they have to sell all those assets and all this product, they'll have to be sold to likely these new stores. So there's opportunity there for them to regain some of their revenue in order to pay for whatever liabilities they have. So John says that was another strawman. John, are you talking about me or the representatives in these videos? Please clarify. Let's make sure that I didn't offend anybody. Well, without at least on purpose. Okay, so let's pull up the back here. I'm not going to play any more of the rest of these clips. But the last thing that kind of got brought up, besides the final thoughts of the majority and minority chairs of these committees, is that they feel like so one is that the only state mentioned they had somewhere in the memo. I think it was like the actual bill is only 2 pages, but there was a memo put out by the sponsors and co-sponsors about like why we should do this, all these details. And apparently in the memo we said that we are the okay, thanks John for clarifying that. Sorry, lost my train of thought. I do that a lot. I get distracted, and I think it's like some sort of ADHD thing. Is it appropriate to say that we are the last control state? Is basically what she's something along those lines of like we're the only state that has this level of control, and that part is actually accurate. What Mihaela was trying to say is that she says we are the only one of 2 states who have a system like ours, us and Utah. And the one representative says, is that really a fair thing to say? It's like, yes, we're one of only 2 states that have our level of control, right? Where the government is in complete control of pricing and of the stores. They're the owner of the stores. The people who work in those stores are government employees. All those stipulations and such. Other stores have control. There are other ABC states like Virginia, like Alabama, like even Ohio. Ohio's a different kind of system, and all these things, all these other states are considered. Just give me a second. All these other states are considered ABC states, right? But they're not to the level. These other states are not to the level that we are. Like our level of strictness and control by the government is higher than anything else. Now bringing all that back in, those are my thoughts on everything and all the things that got brought up. Even hearing arguments from people about it in here in the Pittsburgh Whiskey Friends post on both sides of the issue, and the PLCB post I posted on the PLCB Reddit. I'm still highly in favor of going to privatization, and I am totally understanding of why we're doing it this way. Scott had mentioned Lou Bryson, who is also a big crusader for privatization in Pennsylvania and has done a lot of research. He gave a lot of comments on the Pittsburgh Whiskey Post, Pittsburgh Whiskey Friends post, and they were very helpful. I don't necessarily agree with everything, but they're very helpful. And I'm trying to remember where I was going with this. And he didn't like the way that they're going about this bill, about just putting it, just kind of leaving it the way it is. And my thing with this bill, though, is that, and I understand why they're doing it this way. That we have tried so many times in the past. Apparently, we have about 30 years of proposals trying to go privatize. Like that's one of those things. Like we have tried that many times. 30 years we've been trying to go private at different levels, and not just it's not just been on one party. It's been on both parties trying to go private for different reasons. And you know, it's flip flopped on which side wants it. But we have 30 years proposals, so which is great. In a sense, that's actually great. So because that means we have all those proposals that we can look at. If this was passed in the House and passed by us as constituents, the legislation has 30 years of proposals to look over to look for good ideas. Not only that, because we're one of the last states to go private, we can look at other states and see what they're doing to figure out how they're doing it, to figure out what we can do in our system to make it work. One of the states that was mentioned as a great state where people are generally happy about it and is New Hampshire. I don't fully understand New Hampshire's system. I haven't looked enough into it to say yes or no that, yeah, New Hampshire system is great. But apparently that's that's a state where people are generally happy with the way the system works. So that's great. And so to go back to my main point then, is like, I'm okay with them doing it this way because they're going to, it at least gets the ball rolling. It forces the legislation to figure out how to do this, how to regulate things properly, and it forces their hand to do something about it. The reason why these other bills haven't passed, all these 30 years of proposals haven't passed, is because people are getting tied up on how do we deal with pensions? How do we deal with employees? How do we deal with this and that and assets? And it gets all tied up in these things, and then it just falls by the wayside. At least this way, it says, hey, this is law now. This is part of our Constitution that we can't do this anymore. We have 18 months to figure out how we're going to deal with it. So I in that regard, I'm kind of okay with it. Now, I expect that I'm going to talk more about this at some point. I don't know on what platform. I'm not sure. I probably won't be on their live stream. If I do, I'm going to have someone else talking with me so we can have a conversation. And it's not just me talking to you and just rambling on for nearly 2 hours. I kind of posted this very last minute because it was about 2 days ago because it's something that's been on my mind a lot this past weekend. I just really need to get off my chest. So thank you all for kind of talking with me about this and listening to me for about 2 hours about everything. Hopefully, if you want to hear more about this, if you want to have more conversations, leave a comment down below just saying, hey, yeah, I would like to hear more about this, maybe with more people. Based on Scott's comment and all the comments that Lou has mentioned, have made in the post, I'll probably want to have a conversation at least with him, either personally, but if you guys would be interested in hearing that kind of conversation on this kind of platform, just let me know down below. Let me know. I've also talked very briefly to John at Those Dram Yinzers. They're a Pittsburgh-based whiskey podcast. Go check them out. They're great. Those Dram Yinzers. And maybe we can. I'll try to see if I can convince them to do some sort of podcast episode with like myself, them, and perhaps Lou as well. So yeah, just go ahead and leave a comment down below if that's anything you'd be interested in. I think I've said my piece for tonight. I appreciate, again, you all sticking around to let me kind of just rant about this for an hour, 45 minutes. To everyone out there, I hope you guys are having a great St. Patrick's Day. I'm not in favor of getting drunk, so I'm going to ask that you don't. Drink responsibly. Enjoy your Irish whiskey or whatever whiskey you want, Yeah. So just on that note, just enjoy your night, enjoy your weekend. And we will be back next Friday with more videos. Keith, and actually I want to apologize actually before I end the stream. I want to apologize for today's video not being about Irish whiskey. It was actually supposed to be an Irish whiskey brawl today, but when we had we had 2 dates to record. The first date I had an absolutely awful ear infection. I didn't realize, like I can't remember ever having an ear infection like that, or ever having an ear infection actually. And so I was not capable of doing a shoot. And then our backup date, Keith got a flat tire, and I can't all make it. I don't like doing our brawls because it means that there's not enough people necessarily to give a straight vote. And I like to make sure it's just the 3 of us, specifically the 3 of us, because it keeps our brawls consistent with our palettes, and you guys are understanding like who we are and everything. So, yeah. So I ended up having to go to a backup bottle, and I didn't have any videos about Irish whiskey available. I actually was going to save the Kilbeggan video originally for this today, but I was like, oh well, I'll make the whole entire first 3 weeks Irish. It'll be Tullamore, Kilbeggan, and then the brawl, and then the brawl just didn't happen. So actually, the next 4, it's not the next 4 videos. The next video will have all 3 of us. But the 4 videos after that will not have Keith. Keith will not be available for I think it's just 4. So it'll just be Eric and I, and yeah. So hopefully next time, hopefully we will have that brawl soon. That is going to be the next brawl. We're going to do the next Irish brawl. We also have a lot of brawls to do, if I'm honest. We have I have so many different ideas for brawls I want to do that has nothing to do with any of the ones already up here. We have enough single malts now to do a single malt, a Scotch single malt brawl. I kind of want to do an 86 proof brawl with Old Forester, Benchmark Top Floor, and I think Jim Beam Black, and one other bottle. I don't remember which one. So yeah, let me know which brawl you want to see after we do our Irish brawl. Because we have a lot of possibilities. Let's see. Rye brawl. We have enough ryes now to do a rye brawl, so that's available too. Thank you all for your time, and enjoy your night.